If Mosul Dam fails, a wall of water reaches the city in under 4 hours. 1.5 million people live in its path. The only thing preventing that is a grouting operation that has run every single day since 1986. 24 machines work around the clock, filling a foundation that dissolves as fast as they can patch it. It all traces back to a decision every geologist warned against. In the late 1970s, teams of Soviet and Swiss geologists surveyed the Tigris Valley north of Mosul. Their field reports, preserved in archives from Moscow to Zurich, described the ground beneath the proposed dam as a labyrinth of gypsum, anhydrite, and fractured marl, a foundation that would dissolve when exposed to water. The Soviet feasibility dossier, stamped IG-76 Mosul Year 1, called for a grout curtain extending at least 200 meters below the riverbed. The Swiss technical annex, signed by Dr. Walter Müller in March 1980, warned that only a full-width curtain and continuous monitoring could keep the structure stable. Both studies pointed to the same risk. The Fatah Formation's thick gypsum beds would behave, in the words of one internal Iraqi memo, like a sinkhole in a bathtub. Yet inside the Ministry of Water in Baghdad, the technical warnings collided with a different reality. In July 1980, budget ledgers show a 38% cut to the planned grouting program, redirecting millions to hydroelectric equipment. Ministry minutes from September 22, 1980, record a meeting where Saddam Hussein's representative dismissed the foreign consultant's advice. The order was clear: proceed with construction, scale back foundation treatment, and finish the dam quickly to showcase national progress. Political urgency takes precedence over technical delay. By the time the final design was approved in 1981, only a minimal pilot grouting program remained. United States State Department cables from early 1981, signed by geologist James L. Hendricks, warned that the dam's foundation treatment appears insufficient given the karstic substratum. But the decision had already been made. The dam would rise atop the dissolving Fatah Formation, its fate sealed not by engineering, but by decree. The consequences of that choice would surface as soon as the reservoir began to fill. Water first pressed against the dam's face in September 1985. Within weeks, engineering field logs noted a steady trickle seeping through the upstream toe. At first a nuisance, then a pattern. By early 1986, the seepage measured 150 liters per second, enough to fill a small swimming pool every hour. Along the reservoir's edge, springs erupted in clusters, lining up at intervals of 150 meters, 300 meters, and 500 meters from the main embankment. Technicians mapped these outlets, marking each spot where clear water surfaced through the soil, carrying with it the chemical fingerprint of the Fatah Formation below. The numbers that followed did not belong in any engineer's comfort zone. Water samples from the new springs showed high concentrations of calcium sulfate, evidence that the gypsum foundation was dissolving directly into the flow. Calculations from the 1985 to 1986 field logs put the daily loss at 42 to 80 tons of gypsum, enough to fill 2 dump trucks every single day. Sinkholes began to appear in the downstream floodplain, some as wide as 12 meters, their edges collapsing into fresh voids beneath the surface. One Iraqi engineer described it bluntly: the ground started to eat itself. The Swiss consultancy's kinetic model, drafted years earlier, had warned of this dissolution rate if the grout curtain was incomplete. Now, the math was visible in the landscape itself. Every day, the foundation lost more mass than the original grouting program could replace. The pilot grout curtain, scaled back by decree, proved no match for the chemistry at work under the reservoir. The dam's foundation was dissolving in real time, and the only response left was to grout inject, and patch without pause. The numbers made one thing clear: this was not a problem to be solved, but a race that would never end. Inside the galleries beneath the Mosul Dam, the routine never stops. Since 1986, a fleet of 24 grouting machines has worked in shifts around the clock, 7 days a week. Each rig drills deep into the foundation, pumping a cement clay slurry into the voids carved by dissolving gypsum. Operations logs from the Ministry of Water read like a ledger of emergency. 95,000 tons of grout mixed, injected, and counted, enough to build a small city, all of it vanishing into the earth below. The crews rotate in 3 shifts, drilling, injecting, checking pressure, and logging every meter grouted. If a pump fails, a replacement is wheeled in within hours. If a cavity is missed, water finds it. The dam's crest settles by 15 millimeters each year, a slow descent that never quite stops. One engineer described the schedule as a race with the ground itself. The numbers tell the story: 24 machines, 95,000 tons of grout, and a dam that sinks a little more every year. Any pause, whether for war, budget, or broken equipment, means the foundation resumes its silent retreat. The system works, but only as long as the grouting never halts. And everyone on the crew knows what happens if it does. Hydraulic models commissioned by European and American agencies have tried to answer a single question: what happens if the grouting stops and the Mosul Dam gives way? The most widely cited scenario, run by the Joint Research Center using a 2-dimensional shallow water model, calculates a peak flood discharge of nearly 12,000 cubic meters per second. That is enough water to fill 5 Olympic swimming pools every second, surging down the Tigris toward Mosul and beyond. The wave would reach the city in about 4 hours, overtopping riverbanks, highways, and power stations in its path. Engineers have tested the sensitivity of this disaster to the level of water stored behind the dam. Internal modeling from Iraqi technical teams, echoed in U.S. Army Corps of Engineers briefings, suggests that lowering the reservoir to 70% of full storage can reduce the peak discharge by about 30%. The Ministry of Water Resources has quietly adopted this as an unofficial safety margin, keeping the lake below maximum whenever possible. But the margin is thin. Even at reduced volume, the projected flood would still overwhelm Mosul's defenses and send a surge downstream that would take days to subside. The economic consequences are mapped in red lines and dollar figures. World Bank exposure studies estimate direct damages at $6 billion US, not counting the loss of agricultural land, bridges, or the long-term impact on Iraq's power grid. One internal memo from 2016 Risk Workshop put it bluntly: a breach at Mosul is not a local event. It is a national emergency. The numbers are abstract until they are not. They explain why, when ISIS seized the dam, U.S. General Sean McFarland called it a weapon of mass destruction in the wrong hands. They also explain why every discussion about Mosul's safety returns to the same uneasy question: what happens if the patchwork fails, even for a single day? On August 7, 2014, the Mosul Dam's pumps stopped, and ISIS took control. In just 11 days, decades of maintenance vanished. Nearly 30% of the dam's grout, thousands of tons, was stolen or lost. Sensors buried in the structure recorded a sudden, dangerous shift. Settlement rates jumped from 15 millimeters a year to as much as 5 centimeters. General Sean McFarland called the dam a weapon of mass destruction in the wrong hands. The emergency response was swift but costly. The United States Army Corps of Engineers, AECOM, and Trevi SP launched a $530 million stabilization effort. Over 3 years, crews drilled 1,200 new boreholes and injected 55,000 tons of grout. A dense sensor network was installed, and 250 Iraqi engineers and technicians were trained to monitor every movement. Despite all this, the ground kept sinking by centimeters each year. The mission bought time, not certainty. When the dam was handed back in 2019, the risk remained just beneath the surface. December 2019 brought a formal handover at Mosul Dam. Iraqi officials raised flags and delivered speeches, marking the shift from foreign-led emergency repairs to local stewardship under the Ministry of Water Resources. Yet the Badush Dam, intended as the dam's safeguard, remained unfinished, just 40% complete, its concrete frame untouched since the early 1990s. No new contracts had been signed. Foreign expertise dwindled to 30%, with most international engineers replaced by newly trained Iraqis. Annual safety budgets now stood at $22 million from Baghdad and $8 million from the Kurdistan regional government, far less than previous years. In late 2023, engineers introduced a smart grouting pilot, trimming grout use by 15%, but the system's success depended on sensors and pumps, keeping pace with the shifting ground. The foundation kept moving, the grout kept vanishing, and Badush remained a distant promise. Today, engineers still inject grout, sometimes over 500 tons a week, into a dam sinking 15 millimeters each year. As one U.S. general warned, this is not a fix, it's a race. The handover ceremony ended, but the math remains, and the water, as always, waits. Share your thoughts below.